What if the world you know still hides secrets older than history itself? What if there are structures so mysterious, so perfectly built, that even today's technology can't explain how they came to be? From vanished portals carved with impossible precision, to temples that glow under the midnight sky, these ancient sites challenge everything we think we know about the past. Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where we uncover the most unsolved ancient structures that shouldn't exist. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more deep and fascinating journeys into the unknown, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The vanished portals of Puma Punku, beneath the high, thin air of the Bolivian plateau, where the wind cuts through silence like a whisper from another age, lies the ancient site of Puma Punku. Here, scattered across a barren field of stone and dust, are colossal blocks of andesite and red sandstone. They are cut with such impossible precision that even today, with our machines and lasers, they seem like the work of someone or something that understood stone far beyond what we can comprehend. The name Puma Punku translates to the door of the puma. It's a name that feels fitting when you stand among these ruins and look out at the flat horizon, where the Andes stretch like an endless spine of time. The site seems to hold a memory of doors that lead nowhere, of gateways that once opened to something now long vanished. But what was Puma Punku, and why does it feel as though it should not exist? Archaeologists say this place was part of a larger complex belonging to the Tiwanaku culture, a people who lived here more than 1,500 years ago, yet the stones tell a different story. Some of them weigh over 100 tons, cut from quarries miles away. Their edges are so sharp that you could run your finger along them and almost cut your skin. Holes are drilled perfectly, grooves run in straight, perfect lines, as though made by machines that did not exist in that time. At least, not that we know of. Imagine the scene, high above sea level, at nearly 13,000 feet, a civilization without wheels or iron tools, somehow shaping and transporting these stones. No written records remain, no blueprints, only the stones themselves, scattered like fragments of an unfinished puzzle. Some lie on their sides, half buried in the soil. Others stand alone, like massive H-shaped blocks, each identical, each carved with a precision that even modern engineers marvel at. Standing there, it feels like you've stepped into the remnants of something far older than what history tells us. When you approach Puma Punku, the first thing that strikes you is the stillness. It's not like other ruins, where walls and columns tell stories of what once stood. Here, there are no intact buildings, no clear outlines of rooms. It feels as though the entire place was dismantled, like someone took apart an ancient machine and left its parts scattered in the dust. The blocks are not random, they're modular, designed to interlock like puzzle pieces. This is what makes them so strange. Who needed this kind of precision, and why? Some say Puma Punku was a ceremonial site, a sacred place where the Tiwanaku worshipped their gods. Others think it might have been a palace or a fortress. But there's also another theory, one that whispers through the air when you're alone there at dusk. Some believe Puma Punku is far older than the Tiwanaku, that the people who came after simply found these stones and built their culture around them, like inheritors of something left behind. Archaeologists have tried to date the site, but the stones give no answers. Some studies suggest the foundations of Puma Punku could be more than 12,000 years old, built before the end of the last ice age. If that's true, it would rewrite everything we know about human civilization. Picture the journey of these stones. Some of them were quarried from a site over 50 miles away, brought across rough terrain with no rivers or roads. How? We don't know. To move a 100-ton block today, we'd need cranes, trucks and heavy machinery. The Tiwanaku had none of that. Did they use ropes and manpower, logs and sledges? Perhaps. But even then, the logistics are staggering. You would need thousands of people working in perfect coordination just to shift one of these stones. And then, there's the carving. The H-shaped blocks are the most famous. Each one is cut with perfect 90-degree angles. Their surfaces are polished smooth. Some have channels carved into them that look almost mechanical, as though they were meant to fit something. A beam, a lock, a door. Some researchers have suggested these blocks were part of a massive structure, like the frame of a giant stone building, now lost to time. Others imagine them as portals, gateways to something unknown. There is also a strange feeling of intention about this site. The way the stones are shaped suggests they were not simply decorative, they were functional. And yet, whatever function they had is a mystery. Did they support a roof? Did they form walls? Or did they serve some purpose we can no longer understand? The first Europeans to see Puma Punku were Spanish chroniclers in the 16th century. They were stunned. Some of them wrote that the ruins must have been built by giants, or by a race of gods who came before humans. One chronicler, Pedro Cieza de León, wrote that the stones were so large and so perfectly cut that they seemed impossible. Even today, that feeling hasn't changed. Walking among the stones, you can see marks that look almost as though they were made by advanced tools, saw marks, drill holes, grooves so straight they could have been cut by a machine. Some modern engineers have looked at these and admitted that replicating this precision would be difficult, even with today's technology. This raises uncomfortable questions. Did the Tiwanaku have some kind of lost technique? Or was Puma Punku built by an even older civilization, one that disappeared without leaving a trace? There's a legend among the Aymara people of Bolivia that says Puma Punku was built in a single night. According to their stories, the stones were brought here by the gods themselves. One goddess, they say, used her magic to float the stones through the air, placing them gently into position. It's a beautiful story, and when you stand there, looking at these enormous blocks, it almost feels believable. Because the alternative, that humans without modern tools did this, feels just as impossible. The landscape around Puma Punku adds to its mystery. The site sits near Lake Titicaca, one of the highest navigable lakes in the world, and a place that has always been surrounded by myths. Local legends speak of Viracocha, the creator god, who rose from the waters of the lake to bring life and knowledge to the people. Could Puma Punku have been built in honor of Viracocha, or could it have been connected to something even older, something that existed before the legends themselves? At sunset, the stones of Puma Punku turn a warm shade of red. The wind picks up, carrying with it the sound of nothing but time. It's easy to imagine this place as it might have been, a sprawling temple or palace, filled with people, rituals, and life. But all of that is gone now. What's left are the pieces, perfectly carved, impossibly heavy pieces that seem to wait for someone to solve the riddle they left behind. When night falls, the sky above Puma Punku becomes a blanket of stars. The silence here is profound. You can almost hear your own heartbeat. It's moments like this that make you wonder, what if Puma Punku wasn't just built for the people who lived here? What if it was built for the sky? The precision of the stones, the alignments, could this have been an ancient observatory, a place where the movements of the stars were tracked long before modern astronomy? No one knows. And maybe that's the real beauty of Puma Punku. It is a question carved in stone, a reminder that there are chapters of human history we may never fully read. The forgotten temples of Göbekli Tepe. Far to the southeast of Turkey, on a dusty hill overlooking a quiet landscape, lies one of the most mysterious and bewildering places on earth, Göbekli Tepe. Long before the pyramids of Egypt, long before Stonehenge, long before even the first known cities, there was this temple, a place carved from stone at a time when humans were still thought to be simple hunter-gatherers, a place that should not exist. Göbekli Tepe is old, so old that its existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. Archaeologists have dated it to around 11,000 years ago, which means that while the world was just emerging from the Ice Age, people here were already creating a sacred site of unimaginable complexity. It is, quite simply, the oldest known temple in the world. When you stand here, among the dusty pillars and half-buried rings of stone, you can almost feel the weight of time pressing down. Each carved surface tells a silent story of people who hunted wild animals, who roamed the forests and grasslands, yet somehow gathered here to build something that would outlast them by millennia. The first impression of Göbekli Tepe is one of wonder mixed with confusion. It doesn't look like a city. There are no houses, no streets, no signs of ordinary daily life. Instead, you find enormous stone pillars arranged in great circles, some standing as tall as 16 feet, others weighing more than 20 tons. Each pillar was cut from limestone, dragged from the quarries nearby, and set upright with deliberate care. What is even more astonishing are the carvings on these pillars. They are not random scratches or simple symbols. They are elaborate, detailed images of animals, foxes, boars, snakes, vultures, scorpions, creatures that would have been both feared and revered in those times. Some of the carvings are so lifelike that they seem to move when the sunlight hits them at certain angles. There are abstract symbols too, shapes and patterns that no one has fully deciphered. These carvings suggest something extraordinary. They tell us that whoever built Göbekli Tepe was not just concerned with survival. They had stories, they had myths, they had a spiritual or religious life so powerful that they were willing to work together to create a place of worship, a place of ceremony, at a time when most humans were still living in small, scattered groups. Imagine what it must have taken to build this place. We are talking about people without metal tools, without wheels, without the technology we take for granted. To carve and transport these massive stones would have required hundreds of people working together in a way that seems almost impossible for such an early period in history. And yet, they did it. Some archaeologists believe that the construction of Göbekli Tepe was itself a turning point in human history. It may have been the reason people began to settle down, to form larger communities, and eventually to create agriculture. Instead of farming leading to temples, it might have been the other way around. The need for a temple like this could have driven people to invent farming just so they could feed the workers needed to build it. When the site was first discovered in the 1990s, it changed everything we thought we knew about ancient humans. Before Göbekli Tepe, the oldest known religious structures were thousands of years younger. It forced us to reconsider the timeline of human civilization. What if humans have always been storytellers? What if belief and spirituality were not byproducts of civilization, but the very reason it began? One of the strangest things about Göbekli Tepe is that it was deliberately buried. Yes, at some point, thousands of years after it was built, the people who created it filled the site with earth and stone, covering it up as if to hide it from the world. No one knows why. Was it a ritual closure, like putting a sacred object to rest? Was it an attempt to preserve it, knowing that it would one day be found? Or was it something darker, a sign that this place had outlived its purpose, or become too dangerous to leave standing? The deliberate burial is one of the reasons the site is so well preserved today. The carvings, though weathered by time, still carry an eerie clarity. When archaeologists uncovered them, it was as if they were seeing the handprints of people who lived 11,000 years ago, their thoughts and fears etched into stone. As you walk among the circles, you notice that each one has two massive pillars in the center. These central stones are larger than the others, standing like silent guardians. Some researchers believe they represent deities or spirits, maybe even the ancestors of the people who built the place. Others think the pillars are stylized representations of humans, their arms and hands faintly carved on the sides. If you stand in the center of one of these circles and look up at the sky, you might feel something stir inside you. It is said that ancient people believed in the connection between the heavens and the earth, that places like this were built not just for ceremonies, but as a bridge between the human world and the spirit world. Could Göbekli Tepe have been aligned with the stars? Some researchers have suggested that the site's layout reflects constellations from thousands of years ago. If true, this would mean that the builders had a knowledge of the night sky far beyond what we imagined for their time. The air at Göbekli Tepe is dry and still. Sometimes the wind carries a whisper from the surrounding hills, but mostly it's silent, so silent that you can hear your own breathing. Standing there, you can't help but think about the people who came here long before us. What were they thinking when they carved these stones? What stories did they tell under the night sky? What songs did they sing? What prayers did they whisper as they gathered around fires in the shadow of these pillars? It's humbling to realize that these people, who lived so long ago, were capable of creating something that would last for thousands of years. It makes you wonder, what will remain of us 11,000 years from now? There are still many mysteries about Göbekli Tepe. No one knows exactly who built it, or why. There are no written records, no clues left behind apart from the stones themselves. We don't even know what the people who built it called it. The name Göbekli Tepe means potbelly hill in modern Turkish, but that's just a description of the mound where it was found. Some archaeologists think it was a temple where people came from miles around to worship. Others believe it might have been a place of initiation or ceremony, perhaps even a kind of ancient storytelling site where myths were brought to life. Then there are those who wonder if Göbekli Tepe was built not for gods, but for the stars, an astronomical observatory built thousands of years before recorded history. But perhaps the most haunting question is this: how many other places like this are still hidden beneath the earth? Göbekli Tepe was only discovered because a shepherd noticed something unusual on the hill. What if there are dozens of sites like this, waiting quietly beneath the soil, holding secrets about who we were and what we believed, long before history began? When the sun sets over the hills of southeastern Turkey, the light turns golden, and the pillars of Göbekli Tepe cast long shadows across the ground. The carvings of animals, serpents and vultures seem to glow with an almost otherworldly life. It is easy to imagine a time when fires burned here, when the people gathered in circles, their faces lit by flickering flames, telling stories of creation and of the spirits that ruled their world. Perhaps the people who built Göbekli Tepe are not so different from us. They wanted to leave a mark, to build something bigger than themselves, something that would outlive them, and in that, they succeeded. Even now, as archaeologists continue to study the site, new discoveries are being made. Every layer of soil holds new secrets, new carvings, new patterns, new hints about the lives of the people who built this place. And yet, the more we uncover, the more questions we find. Göbekli Tepe is like a riddle carved in stone. We may never know all the answers, and maybe that's the point. Maybe it was always meant to inspire wonder. The cliffside monasteries that kiss the sky. High on the jagged cliffs, where the earth seems to dissolve into the sky, there are places so remote, so impossibly perched, that you wonder how any human hand could have built them. These are the cliffside monasteries, the sanctuaries that appear to defy both time and gravity, clinging to sheer rock faces like ancient dreams frozen in stone. To stand before one of these monasteries is to feel both awe and humility, for they seem less like buildings and more like living prayers carved into the mountains themselves. The wind whispers against their weathered walls, the clouds brush past their balconies, and the silence is so deep that it feels like the world is holding its breath. Long ago, monks and hermits sought the most unreachable corners of the earth, places where the distractions of human life would fall away, leaving only the sound of their own breath and the endless sky. These monasteries were not built for the sake of beauty, though they are breathtaking. They were built for solitude, for communion with something greater than human understanding. And yet, despite their spiritual purpose, they stand today as masterpieces of architecture, as if the very mountains themselves allowed these creations to rise from their bones. Imagine the Meteora monasteries of Greece, for instance. Rising above the plains of Thessaly, these towering pillars of rock seem like they were placed there by gods. On top of them, centuries ago, monks built sanctuaries that appear weightless, hovering in the heavens. To reach them, you would once have needed to climb a rope ladder or be hauled up in a basket, swaying over the dizzying drop below. There were no roads then, no carved steps, only the courage to trust in something beyond fear. The monks who lived there spent their days in quiet prayer, far from the world below, their lives governed by the rhythm of sunlight and shadow. How did they build such places? The stones, the beams, the walls, all of it had to be carried up by hand, piece by piece, over years and decades. Each brick laid in silence, each prayer etched into the walls, until the monastery itself became an extension of the mountain. The Meteora monasteries have stood for over 600 years, watching over the valley, watching as empires rose and fell, as armies marched, and the world changed beneath them, and still, they remain, steadfast as the rocks they rest upon. Far to the east, in Bhutan, there is another place that seems to have been born from a dream, the Taksang Monastery, known as the Tiger's Nest. It clings to a cliff face more than 3,000 feet above the valley floor, its white walls and golden roofs glowing against the dark stone. The story says that the great master guru Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism to Bhutan, flew to this spot on the back of a tigress and meditated in a cave for 3 months. Whether or not the tale is true, the monastery has an almost otherworldly energy. When the clouds roll in, the tiger's nest vanishes, hidden in the mist as though the mountain has swallowed it whole, and when the clouds part, it reappears like a vision, timeless and serene. Climbing to the tiger's nest is no small task. The path winds through forests of pine, the scent of incense and butter lamps lingering in the air. As you ascend, the world below grows quiet, and soon all you hear is the sound of your own heartbeat and the wind through the trees. By the time you reach the monastery, it feels as though you've entered another realm, a place untouched by the noise and rush of modern life. Inside, the walls are covered in ancient murals, the air thick with the fragrance of juniper smoke, and the silence carries a weight that feels almost sacred. But Bhutan and Greece are only part of the story. Across the world, there are other cliffside sanctuaries, each with its own tale. In Tibet, the Phugtol monastery seems to grow out of the rock itself, as if the mountain and the temple were born together. Its whitewashed walls are tucked into a honeycomb of caves, overlooking a winding river far below. For centuries, monks have lived here in isolation, devoting their lives to study and meditation. It's said that one of the caves was once home to a great sage, and that his spirit still lingers, blessing the air with a sense of quiet strength. In China, perched high above the Yellow River, the hanging monastery of Hengshan clings to a cliff like a bird's nest made of wood and stone. Its wooden beams are anchored deep into the rock, and yet, despite being more than 1,500 years old, it has never fallen. When the wind blows, the monastery seems to hum with a low, ancient song, as though the mountain itself is singing through its beams. The monks who once lived here believed that the height of the monastery brought them closer to heaven, that by removing themselves from the chaos of the earth, they could hear the whispers of eternity. What is it about these places that captivates us? Maybe it's the way they stand as symbols of human determination, built in places where building should be impossible. Or maybe it's because they remind us of the quiet strength that lives inside all of us, the ability to rise above the storms, to find stillness in the most unlikely places. These monasteries are not just buildings, they are living echoes of the past. Every stone, every carved beam, every faded mural tells the story of countless hands that worked in silence, of lives spent in prayer, of moments of doubt and faith that were etched into the walls like breath into glass. They have witnessed centuries pass by, watching as travelers and pilgrims arrived weary and hopeful, looking for something they couldn't find in the world below. In some of these monasteries, life remains much as it was centuries ago. The monks still wake before the sun, their chants rising in the thin morning air. They still tend to their small gardens, growing food from the rocky soil, and they still light butter lamps that flicker in the darkness, their flames dancing like tiny stars. There is something profoundly grounding about this way of life, something that feels both ancient and eternal. Imagine standing on the balcony of one of these monasteries, looking down at the world below. The valley stretches out like a painting, rivers winding like silver threads, forests fading into the horizon. The air is thin but clean, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. Time feels slower here, as if the clocks have stopped ticking, and all that remains is the steady rhythm of breath and silence. Sometimes when the wind shifts, you can hear distant bells, their sound carried across the mountains like a call from another time. These bells, once rung by monks to mark the passing of hours, now seem like voices from the past, reminding you that life is fleeting, but the mountains endure. Each monastery has its own mysteries. Who were the people who first climbed these cliffs? Who risked their lives to build something so enduring? How did they carry heavy stones and wooden beams up sheer walls of rock without the technology we have today? Did they know that their work would outlast them, that their devotion would leave a mark that would remain long after their names were forgotten? There is something profoundly moving about this thought, that these places were built not for fame, not for glory, but for something deeper. A quiet connection to the divine, a bridge between earth and sky. As night falls, these monasteries take on a different kind of magic. The walls, painted by the last light of the sun, seem to glow with warmth. Shadows stretch long across the rocks, and the mountains turn into dark silhouettes against a sky dusted with stars. From within, the soft glow of lamps spills through wooden windows, and the sound of chants floats into the night like a prayer carried on the wind. If you stay long enough, you might begin to feel the same stillness that the monks sought, a sense that the noise of the world, the rush, the worry, the endless chatter, has fallen away, leaving only a quiet heartbeat and the endless sky above. These monasteries remind us of something we often forget in the rush of modern life, that there is power in stillness, in silence, in the act of simply being. They are monuments not just to faith, but to patience, to the enduring spirit of those who believed in something greater than themselves. Even after centuries they remain, kissed by the clouds, untouched by time, watching the world from above, just as they always have. The bridge that time left behind. There are places in this world where time seems to stop, where the air feels thicker, carrying whispers from centuries past, and where the stones beneath your feet remember more than you can ever imagine. One of these places is an ancient bridge, weathered, silent, and forgotten, standing as a ghost of civilizations long gone. They call it the bridge that time left behind, not because it is lost, but because it has endured when everything else around it has changed. It doesn't simply span a river, it spans history itself. To approach such a bridge is to feel as if you are stepping out of the present and into a different world. The stones are uneven, worn smooth by countless footsteps, traders, soldiers, pilgrims, wanderers, each of them leaving an invisible mark on the bridge's surface. The arches curve gently, as though designed not just for strength, but for beauty, rising and falling like the slow rhythm of breath. Moss creeps along the cracks, and tiny flowers bloom where no gardener has ever cared for them, as if nature itself has claimed this relic as its own. No one knows exactly who built it. There are no records, no writings etched into its stone to mark the name of its maker. Some believe it was constructed by an empire that has long since crumbled to dust, its people forgotten, its cities swallowed by forests and rivers. Others think the bridge may be older than that, older even than the civilizations we know, built by hands that understood the earth in ways we cannot fathom. It is said that if you stand in the middle of the bridge at dawn, when the mist is thick and the first light touches the water below, you can almost hear echoes, voices speaking in languages no one has heard for thousands of years, carrying stories of the people who once crossed here. The bridge itself is a marvel of engineering. The stones are fitted together with such precision that no mortar was needed. Each block rests against the next with a quiet, unshakable strength. Even now, centuries later, through floods and storms and earthquakes, the bridge remains standing. Modern engineers study it with curiosity, unable to fully understand how it has endured for so long without collapsing. Some say its builders must have possessed knowledge that has been lost to time, techniques of stone cutting and weight distribution that we can only guess at. But the mystery of the bridge is not just in how it was built, it's also in the sense of presence it carries, as though it is alive in some way. People who visit often speak of feeling watched, not in a frightening way, but in the sense that the bridge itself is aware of you. You can feel its history, its quiet patience, its strength. There is a stillness to it, a kind of eternal waiting, as though it knows that the world will change, but it will remain. Imagine the travelers who once crossed this bridge. Perhaps there was a young soldier, his armor heavy on his shoulders, the sound of his boots echoing softly on the stones as he marched toward a battle he did not want to fight. Maybe there was a merchant, leading a caravan of goods, silk, spices, precious stones, each step bringing him closer to a distant city where his wares would be sold. Perhaps there were lovers, stealing a moment together as they crossed at sunset, their hands brushing against the cool stones as they whispered promises that history never recorded. The bridge holds all of these memories, silent but enduring, like fingerprints pressed into its very foundation. Some say that this bridge was built not just as a crossing, but as a monument. A symbol of connection between worlds, between lands, between people. In ancient times, bridges were more than just structures. They were sacred. To build a bridge was to unite, to bring together what had been divided. This one, with its graceful arches and unyielding stones, seems to embody that idea. Even now, when few people cross it, it stands as a reminder that some connections are never truly lost. The landscape around the bridge has changed over the centuries. Once there might have been villages nearby, fields of wheat, markets bustling with life. Now the area is quiet, overgrown with wild grasses and trees that have grown tall and thick. The river below is slow and deep, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. Birds nest in the cracks between the stones, and at night, the bridge is illuminated only by the pale glow of the moon. In those quiet hours when no one is around, it feels as though the bridge is dreaming, remembering the voices, the footsteps, the countless lives that once passed over it. There are legends about this place. Some say the bridge was built on sacred ground, where two rivers once met in a swirling, dangerous current that no one could cross. It is said that the builder was a man who made a pact with the gods, or perhaps with something darker. He promised that the bridge would stand for eternity, and in return, he gave something of himself, his life, his soul, his name. No one knows if this story is true, but there is a certain feeling when you stand upon the stones, as though the air itself hums with an old power. Other stories speak of ghosts. They say that on certain nights, when the mist is thick and the moon is full, shadows move across the bridge even when no one is there. These are said to be the spirits of those who once crossed, but never reached the other side. Perhaps they were lost to war, or to the river, or to time itself. Some travelers claim to have seen figures walking slowly across the arches, their faces hidden, their steps silent. Yet, these stories are told with a sense of reverence rather than fear, as though the ghosts are not malicious, but simply bound to the place they once loved. The bridge's beauty is quiet, subtle. It is not adorned with carvings or decorations. Its elegance lies in its simplicity, in the way the stones curve like a frozen wave, in the way the arches cast soft shadows on the water, in the way the entire structure feels both delicate and unshakable. The stones are warm in the sunlight, cool under the moon, and they seem to carry the seasons with them, the bright greens of spring, the golden hues of autumn, the heavy snows of winter. Every season brings a different face to the bridge, and yet it remains the same, unchanging and eternal. Walking across the bridge, you feel something shift inside you. It is as though the air itself grows thicker, heavier, with memory. The sounds of the world, birds calling, the rush of water, the wind through the grass, feel distant, softened, as though the bridge exists slightly out of time. It is easy to imagine that if you stayed too long, you might find yourself stepping, not just across a river, but into another age entirely, into a time when the world was quieter and slower, when people built things not for convenience, but for eternity. The bridge that time left behind is more than just a relic. It is a testament to the strength of human hands and hearts. It is a reminder that even in a world that is constantly changing, there are some things that endure: stone, water, silence, memory, and perhaps that is why we are drawn to such places, why we stand in awe of them, because they remind us of what we have lost and what we might still find. There are other ancient bridges scattered across the world, each with its own story, its own voice. In Italy there are Roman bridges that have stood for over 2,000 years, their arches still carrying travelers across rivers. In China there are stone bridges that curve like dragon spines, built during dynasties that are now only names in history books. In the mountains of Peru there are rope bridges woven from grass, rebuilt every year by the hands of the local people, just as their ancestors did. Each of these bridges is unique, and yet they all share something in common: the ability to connect, to endure, to hold the weight of time. The bridge that time left behind is not famous. It does not appear in guidebooks, and few tourists know its name, and yet for those who find it, it becomes unforgettable. There is something about its quiet dignity, its unspoken history, that lingers long after you have left. You might find yourself thinking about it days or weeks later, wondering who else has crossed it, what other stories its stones could tell. Perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. The bridge remains, but the people who built it are gone. The lives that once passed over it are nothing more than whispers in the wind, and yet the bridge endures, holding those whispers, carrying them forward like a song that never truly ends. When the sun sets behind the hills and the sky turns shades of orange and violet, the bridge is bathed in a golden light, the river reflects the colors of the sky, and for a moment, the whole scene feels almost unreal, like something from a painting. The air grows cool, and the first stars appear, twinkling faintly above. This is when the bridge is at its most beautiful, when the world is quiet, when the past and present seem to merge, when time itself seems to pause, and so the bridge remains, waiting, watching, enduring, a silent witness to centuries of change, a reminder of the strength of human hands and the fragility of human life. It is not just a crossing, it is a memory carved into stone, a link between worlds, a story that continues even when no one is there to tell it. The stone serpents of Quetzalcoatl, in the heart of ancient Mexico, where the jungles breathe with an almost timeless rhythm, and the winds seem to carry the echoes of forgotten voices, there is a place where stone serpents sleep. They are not alive, but they feel alive, carved into the walls of ancient temples, their eyes fixed on horizons long since changed, their jaws open as if mid-roar, frozen in an eternal dance of power and mystery. These are the stone serpents of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, a being that once held the minds and imaginations of entire civilizations in its grasp. When you first lay eyes on these serpents, you feel a sense of both awe and unease. They are immense, their scales chiseled with such precision that you can almost imagine them rippling and shifting under the sun. Their heads, adorned with intricate headdresses of stone feathers, carry a strange expression, something between wisdom and wrath, as if they are both protectors and judges of the land they watch over. They are not just decorations, they are symbols, guardians, storytellers from a world that no longer exists but still whispers to anyone willing to listen. Quetzalcoatl was not an ordinary god. To the ancient peoples of Mesoamerica, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, and others, he was the creator and the bringer of knowledge. He was said to have taught humanity how to plant corn, how to craft tools, how to measure the stars. In some stories he was the one who breathed life into mankind itself, but he was also a serpent, a creature of the earth, and a bird, a being of the sky. He was both heaven and earth, wisdom and chaos, creation and destruction. These stone serpents carved in his image capture that duality. They are powerful yet graceful, terrifying yet beautiful. Standing before the temple of the feathered serpent in Teotihuacan, you cannot help but feel the weight of history pressing down on you. This city, which predates the Aztecs, was once one of the largest and most advanced in the world. At its height, Teotihuacan may have been home to more than 100,000 people, a sprawling metropolis filled with markets, palaces, pyramids and temples. And at the heart of it all stood this temple, adorned with dozens of stone serpent heads, each one carved with painstaking detail. Their open mouths seemed to breathe out the stories of those who lived and died here, of the rituals and sacrifices that took place under the blazing sun, of the nights when the stars aligned and the priests read omens in the heavens. No one truly knows who built Teotihuacan. By the time the Aztecs discovered the city, it had already been abandoned for centuries. They gave it its name, Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were born, because they believed that the gods themselves had created it. The stone serpents, with their fierce expressions and their rows of sharp fangs, must have seemed like guardians of divine secrets, watching over the ruins of a civilization lost to time. Even today, as you walk along the Avenue of the Dead, with the Pyramid of the Sun on one side and the Pyramid of the Moon on the other, you feel as though you are being observed by something greater than yourself, by these silent serpents that refuse to be forgotten. The serpent in Mesoamerican culture was not a simple creature. It was a symbol of transformation. Just as a snake sheds its skin, life itself was seen as a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Quetzalcoatl embodied that cycle, guiding the souls of the dead and the spirits of the living alike. Some of the carvings show him surrounded by shells, feathers, and intricate patterns that hint at water, wind, and sky. Others depict him with his mouth wide open, as if devouring the sun or exhaling creation itself. The more you look at these carvings, the more you realize they are not just stone, they are language. They are messages left behind by people who saw the world differently, who believed that every mountain, every river, every breath of wind was alive. Imagine the ceremonies that took place here, thousands of years ago. Picture the crowds gathered at the base of the temple, the air filled with the scent of burning copal incense, the drums beating like the heartbeat of the earth. Priests wearing elaborate feathered costumes would climb the steep steps, carrying offerings for the gods, food, flowers, and sometimes even blood. For these people, sacrifice was not an act of cruelty, but of giving back to the universe, of maintaining balance. The stone serpents would watch silently as the rituals unfolded, their unblinking eyes fixed on the horizon, as if to remind everyone present that they were part of something far larger than themselves. There is a strange energy in places like this. Even now, when the crowds of ancient worshippers are long gone, you can feel it. The stones are warm under the sun, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, and yet they seem to hum with life. You can almost hear the echoes of chants, the distant sounds of flutes and conch shells, the murmurs of a people who believed they stood on sacred ground. When the sun sets and the sky turns a deep shade of orange, the shadows of the serpents stretch across the temple walls, and it feels as though they are coming alive once more, slithering through the twilight, ready to guard their temple through another night. Archaeologists have studied these serpents for decades, but there is still so much we don't understand. How did the builders of Teotihuacan carve such intricate patterns into stone with the tools they had? How did they move these heavy blocks, stacking them into pyramids that have stood for thousands of years? There are theories, of course, about wooden rollers, ramps, and sheer manpower, but when you stand there, looking at the perfect symmetry of the carvings, at the way the stones fit together without mortar, you can't help but feel there was something more, a level of skill and knowledge that we have lost. Some people believe the stone serpents of Quetzalcoatl were more than just symbols. They think they were part of a larger system, a network of sacred geometry designed to harness the energy of the earth and sky. The alignment of the temples in Teotihuacan is not random. The city was laid out with astonishing precision, with streets and structures aligned to the sun, the stars, and even the cycles of Venus, a planet closely associated with Quetzalcoatl. Could it be that the stone serpents were not just guardians, but conduits, channels through which the divine flowed into the world? Legends say that Quetzalcoatl was not only a god, but also a ruler. He is said to have walked among men, teaching them wisdom and art, bringing peace to the land. But his story is also one of tragedy. According to some myths, he was betrayed, forced to leave his city, and sailed away on a raft of serpents, promising to return one day. Perhaps these stone carvings are not just depictions of a god, but memorials to a king who became divine, a ruler whose memory was too powerful to fade. The jungle around Teotihuacan has slowly begun to reclaim parts of the city. Roots twist through cracks in the stone, vines hang from the walls, and birds nest among the carvings. Yet the serpents remain, their stone faces untouched by time. They have watched empires rise and fall. They have seen the arrival of conquerors, the spread of new religions, the passing of countless generations. And still they remain, silent but unbroken, a reminder of a world that once was, and a mystery that still lingers. When you run your hand over the surface of one of these serpents, you feel the grooves carved by ancient tools, the smoothness of centuries of weathering. It is a strange feeling, both intimate and distant. You are touching the work of someone who lived and died long ago, someone who may have believed that by carving this serpent, they were speaking directly to the gods. It makes you wonder what we will leave behind. What will endure after we are gone? What stone serpents will future generations find? And what will they think of us? The night brings a different kind of magic to this place. As the stars emerge, the pyramids and temples are bathed in silver light, and the stone serpents seem to shift in the shadows. The air grows cool, and the sounds of the day fade into silence. It is easy to imagine that somewhere, in the stillness of the night, Quetzalcoatl himself walks among the ruins, his presence lingering in the wind, in the rustling leaves, in the quiet hum of the universe. The Sungate that gazes into eternity. High in the desolate altiplano of Bolivia, where the sky feels close enough to touch, and the winds carry whispers from ancient times, stands a single monument of stone, alone yet unshaken. The Sungate, Puerta del Sol, has stood here for centuries, perhaps millennia, gazing toward the horizon with an expressionless face that seems both solemn and watchful. It is not just a doorway, it is a puzzle carved from the earth itself, a relic that speaks of a time before memory, before recorded history, a time when gods were thought to walk among men, and the sky itself was part of the sacred landscape. The Sungate is unlike anything else in the world. It is a single slab of andesite stone, towering nearly 10 feet high and weighing over 10 tons. Yet what makes it remarkable is not just its size, but its perfection. The edges are so straight, the carvings so precise, that even modern engineers are puzzled by how it was crafted with the tools of its time. The surface bears intricate glyphs and patterns, arranged with a symmetry and elegance that feels more like the language of the stars than the marks of human hands. Standing before it, you cannot help but feel that it is more than a simple monument. It is as though the stone itself is alive, holding secrets we are not yet meant to understand. The gate is part of Tiwanaku, one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in South America. This ancient city, now reduced to ruins, once stood as the heart of a powerful civilization that predated the Inca by nearly 1,000 years. The Tiwanaku people built temples, pyramids, and canals, cultivating the harsh highland landscape with a skill that still impresses archaeologists today. But much of their history is lost. They left no written language, only stones carved with cryptic images, sun-faced gods, winged beings, serpents, and patterns that seem to trace the movement of celestial bodies. The Sungate, with its mysterious carvings, is thought to be a kind of calendar, or perhaps an astronomical device, designed to mark the solstices and equinoxes. Yet even with decades of study, no one can say for sure what its true purpose was. When you stand at the Sungate and look through its central opening, the view stretches out to the distant Andes. At dawn and dusk, the sunlight passes through this portal in a way that feels deliberate, as though it was built to frame the very soul of the horizon. Some believe it was a sacred threshold, a doorway not meant for people, but for gods, a place where the divine could pass between worlds. Others think it may have been a ceremonial marker, aligning with certain constellations during key times of the year, guiding priests as they performed rituals to honor the sun, the moon, and the stars. The Tiwanaku people worshipped a god known as Viracocha, often depicted with rays of sunlight emanating from his head, holding two staffs as symbols of power. This figure appears on the carvings of the Sungate, surrounded by smaller winged beings, some with bird-like features, others with serpent motifs. These carvings are not random, they tell a story, though we no longer know how to read it. Some scholars suggest that they represent a calendar of 290 days, while others think they might be a kind of cosmic map, showing the relationship between earth and sky. The patterns are so complex, so carefully designed, that even with modern technology, we are still trying to unravel their meaning. Imagine what it must have been like 1,000 years ago, when Tiwanaku was alive with people. The plaza below would have been filled with farmers, traders, and priests, all dressed in bright woven textiles, their faces painted for ceremonies. The air would have carried the scent of burning llama fat and incense, offerings to the gods. The sound of drums and pan flutes would have echoed across the plains, mingling with the voices of the crowd. At sunrise, the first light of the day would have pierced the horizon, passing through the Sungate like a golden spear, bathing the city in light. It would have been a moment of reverence, a sign that the gods were watching, that the balance between earth and sky remained unbroken. But the Tiwanaku civilization did not last forever. For reasons we do not fully understand, perhaps drought, famine, or internal conflict, the city was abandoned. The people who once worshipped at the Sungate vanished, leaving behind only these silent stones. Over time, the Sungate itself fell. It cracked in two, likely from an earthquake, and had to be reassembled by later generations. Even so, its presence remains powerful. When you see it standing alone in the vast altiplano, with nothing but sky and mountains in the distance, you feel a strange mix of awe and melancholy. It is as though the stone itself remembers, holding within its carvings the memories of an entire world that has slipped into the shadows of time. The mystery of the Sungate has drawn explorers and archaeologists for centuries. In the 19th century, European travelers stumbled upon it, baffled by its carvings and its seemingly impossible precision. Some believed it must have been built by a lost civilization far older than the Tiwanaku. Others speculated that it was the work of aliens or gods. These ideas may sound far-fetched, but when you look closely at the carvings, at the perfect symmetry, the deep grooves that seem almost machine-made, it's hard not to wonder how such craftsmanship was possible with stone tools. Even more puzzling is the stone itself. Andesite is an incredibly hard volcanic rock, far tougher than the limestone or sandstone used in other ancient sites. To carve it with such precision would require advanced knowledge of stoneworking, knowledge that, officially, should not have existed in this part of the world over 1,000 years ago. Some researchers have suggested that the Tiwanaku might have had tools tipped with copper and tin, or perhaps used abrasive sand to cut the rock. But these theories still fail to fully explain the clean, sharp lines of the carvings, which look as if they were etched by something far more advanced. Standing in front of the Sungate, you might find your mind wandering, imagining the hands that once carved these patterns. Were they priests, artisans, astronomers? Did they know that their work would outlast them, surviving long after their civilization had crumbled? Did they understand that one day strangers from across the world would stand in the same spot, trying to piece together their story? There is something profoundly human about the Sungate. It speaks of our shared desire to reach beyond ourselves, to touch the eternal, to leave behind something that says we were here, we saw the sun rise and set, we believed in something greater than ourselves. At night, when the sky over Tiwanaku is filled with stars, the Sungate takes on an even more mysterious presence. The carvings catch the moonlight, casting shadows that seem to shift and move. The silence of the Altiplano is broken only by the whisper of the wind, and you can almost imagine that the gods of old are still watching, their gaze as endless as the stars above. Some say that during certain times of the year, when the stars align just right, the gate itself seems to glow, as if it is remembering the rituals of the past. Modern archaeologists continue to study the Sungate, using 3D scans and computer models to try to unlock its secrets. Yet for every answer they find, new questions emerge. Was it really just a calendar, or was it something more, an astronomical observatory, a portal for spiritual journeys, perhaps even a monument designed to connect the living with the afterlife? The truth is that we may never know. The Tiwanaku people left no written words, only symbols, and symbols can be interpreted in many ways. The local Emara people, who are descendants of the ancient inhabitants of this land, see the Sungate as a sacred site. To them it is not just a piece of stone, it is a living connection to their ancestors and to the natural world. They still come here to offer prayers, to leave offerings of coca leaves and flowers, to ask for blessings from the spirits of the earth and sky. Watching them, you begin to understand that the true power of the Sungate is not in its mystery, but in its ability to bring people together, to remind us that we are all part of something much larger than ourselves. As the day draws to a close and the last rays of sunlight pass through the gate, the landscape glows with a soft golden light. The mountains in the distance turn shades of pink and purple, and the air grows cool and still. It is a moment of quiet reflection, a reminder of how small we are in the face of time. The Sungate has seen centuries pass. It has watched empires rise and fall, has stood through storms and earthquakes, has endured the curiosity of countless generations. And still it remains unbroken, gazing into eternity. To stand before the Sungate is to feel a deep connection to the earth, to the sky, to all those who came before us. It is a reminder that even though civilizations may vanish, their stories endure in stone, waiting for someone to listen. The city carved from salt and shadow, beneath the surface of the earth, far away from the warmth of the sun and the noise of the living world, there is a place where time feels frozen, where shadows stretch and curl against walls of pale crystal, and where the air itself hums with silence. This is the city carved from salt and shadow, an ancient labyrinth of corridors and chambers, sculpted from the bones of the earth itself. It is not a place built of stone or wood, but of glimmering, translucent salt, walls that sparkle faintly in the dim light, as if whispering the secrets of an age long past. To step inside such a place is to leave behind everything you know of the surface world, to cross an invisible threshold into something that feels both sacred and forgotten. Imagine walking down a narrow passage carved centuries ago, your footsteps echoing softly against the walls. The air is cool and dry, carrying with it the faint tang of minerals, a scent that clings to your skin like dust. There is no sound except the rhythmic drip of water somewhere deep within the tunnels, and perhaps the quiet brush of your own breath. The walls around you shimmer with a strange light, reflecting the glow of your torch or lantern, each crystal of salt catching the light like a tiny star. It is as if the very earth is alive here, breathing, watching, waiting. The idea of an entire city carved from salt might sound like something from a dream, but there are places in our world where such wonders exist. In ancient times, salt was not just a seasoning or a preservative. It was as valuable as gold. It was the substance of life, essential for survival, treasured by kings and commoners alike. People built entire industries around it, and in some places they dug so deep, carved so far, that their mines became cities, vast underground landscapes of halls and chambers, staircases and statues, all carved from the gleaming white mineral. Some of these salt cities are still known today, places like the Wilicka salt mine in Poland, a labyrinth stretching for over 180 miles beneath the surface, or the ancient salt caverns of Hallstatt in Austria, where miners worked thousands of years ago. But there are others, less known, hidden deeper, their origins shrouded in mystery. Legends tell of a city beneath the desert, where walls of salt reflect the glow of ancient torches, and where entire temples have been carved from the earth. The people who built it are long gone, their names forgotten, but their handiwork remains, a silent testament to a civilization that thrived in darkness. No one knows who first carved the city, or why they chose salt as their medium. Some believe it was a place of refuge, built to protect a community from the harsh sun and the dangers of war. Others think it was sacred ground, a temple complex, where the very walls were considered offerings to the gods. There are even those who whisper that it was not built by human hands at all, but by forces beyond our understanding, beings who shaped the earth long before we walked upon it. If you could wander through its halls, you might see carvings etched into the walls, spirals, sunbursts and shapes that resemble constellations. Some of these carvings seem to tell stories, though the language has been lost to time. You might see chambers that look like gathering halls, with long benches carved from the salt itself, their surfaces smoothed by centuries of use. In other places, the walls rise into arches, so perfect and symmetrical that they seem to defy the rough tools of ancient miners. There are even rumors of statues, towering figures of kings or gods, their faces stern and watchful, their robes rippling as if caught in an eternal wind, all carved from the glittering salt crystal. Salt is a strange material. It is both strong and fragile, capable of lasting for centuries if left untouched, yet vulnerable to the smallest drop of water, which can wear it away over time. To carve a city from salt is to create something that exists in a delicate balance between endurance and impermanence. It is a reminder that nothing we build lasts forever, that even the grandest creations are eventually reclaimed by the earth. The most fascinating thing about these underground salt cities is how alive they feel, even in their silence. When you walk through the corridors, the sound of your footsteps bounces off the walls in a way that makes it seem as if someone is walking with you. The air carries faint echoes, whispers that you can't quite make out, as though the walls themselves remember every sound that has ever passed through them. Sometimes, if you stand still long enough, you might hear a faint rumble deep within the earth, a reminder that these chambers were carved from a living, shifting world, and that the ground beneath your feet is never truly still. Archaeologists who study these sites are often left with more questions than answers. They can measure the width of the tunnels, analyze the tools that were likely used, and even estimate the time periods when the carving took place. But they cannot always explain the why. Why did people choose to carve so deep, to live or worship beneath the ground? Was it necessity, or was it a desire to connect with something beyond the human world, something that felt closer to the heart of the earth itself? There is something profoundly spiritual about these places, as if the builders were trying to reach not for the heavens, but for the very soul of the planet. One of the most haunting legends about the Salt City speaks of a chamber known as the Hall of Shadows. It is said that deep within the labyrinth, there is a vast open space where the ceiling rises like a dark dome, and where the walls are covered in carvings of strange, faceless figures. When a torch is lit, the salt crystals catch the light in such a way that the figures seem to move, their shadows flickering like restless spirits. No one knows who carved these figures, or what they are meant to represent, but some believe they are guardians of the city, watching over it even in the absence of its creators. Another story tells of a river of brine that flows through the lowest level of the city, a black and silent stream that reflects no light. They say the river is cursed, that anyone who drinks from it will lose their memory, forgetting their own name and wandering the tunnels forever. Whether this is true or not, The idea adds to the city's eerie reputation. Explorers who venture into the deepest parts of the labyrinth often speak of feeling disoriented, as though the walls themselves are shifting when they are not looking, as though the city does not want them to leave. Despite its mysteries, the city carved from salt and shadow is also a place of incredible beauty. In some chambers, the salt forms delicate patterns, thin layers that resemble the rings of a tree or the ripples of sand in the desert. In others, the ceiling is studded with tiny salt crystals that sparkle like stars when a light is shone upon them. Some chambers have natural formations, stalactites and stalagmites of pure salt, shaped by the slow drip of mineral-rich water over centuries. These formations look like frozen waterfalls, as if time itself has been captured and held still. To spend time here is to feel the weight of history pressing in on all sides. Every tunnel, every carving, every grain of salt holds a story. Perhaps it was a place where people gathered to trade or to celebrate. Perhaps it was a refuge during times of war, or a sacred site where priests performed rituals in the glow of torchlight. We may never know the full truth, but the mystery is part of what makes it so powerful. It reminds us that the earth is full of places we do not fully understand, places that are both beautiful and unsettling, both human and otherworldly. There is a moment, deep in the labyrinth, when the silence becomes so complete that it feels like a living thing. You can hear the blood rushing in your ears, the quiet creak of your own joints as you move, the soft whisper of fabric as you shift your weight. It is in these moments that you begin to sense the presence of those who came before you. Not as ghosts, but as echoes, shadows of lives that were once lived in these halls. You imagine the miners carving by the light of oil lamps, their faces streaked with salt dust, their hands rough and calloused from years of labor. You imagine the priests, dressed in ceremonial robes, chanting prayers as they walked through the torchlit corridors, their voices rising and falling in rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. The city carved from salt and shadow is not just a place of history, it is a place of imagination. It invites you to wonder, to create stories for the people who lived there, to fill the silence with your own thoughts and questions. It is a reminder that the past is never truly gone, that it lingers in the places we leave behind, in the stones we carve, in the pathways we create. And as you finally make your way back to the surface, back to the warmth of the sun and the noise of the living world, you cannot help but look back over your shoulder. The entrance to the Salt City seems smaller now, a dark mouth leading into the unknown. You feel a strange sense of gratitude for the silence, for the stillness, for the reminder that there are places in this world where time moves differently, where the earth itself holds its breath, waiting for someone to listen. The tower that speaks with the wind. There is a place where the wind is never silent, where every breath of air that moves across the landscape seems to whisper through ancient stones, carrying voices from a time long gone. In the heart of a barren plateau, surrounded by rolling hills and the endless horizon, there rises a tower unlike any other. It is not tall by the standards of modern architecture, not gleaming with glass or steel, but it stands with a kind of timeless defiance. Its stones are rough, weathered by centuries of storms, and yet they seem alive, humming softly when the wind passes through the gaps between them. The locals call it the tower that speaks with the wind, and if you stand close enough on a quiet evening, you might swear you hear words being carried in the currents of air, whispers of forgotten stories, fragments of ancient songs, or perhaps just the sigh of the earth itself. The tower is older than any village that surrounds it. No one truly knows who built it, or why it was built on this particular stretch of land where no trees grow and the soil is thin and pale. Some say it was a watchtower, a place where sentinels once stood to keep an eye on invaders or passing caravans. Others claim it was something far stranger, a kind of wind instrument, a stone flute crafted by an ancient civilization that understood the language of the breeze. The truth has been lost to time, buried under layers of legend and speculation, but what remains is undeniable. When the wind blows, the tower sings. Imagine standing at the base of this structure. The ground is rough beneath your feet, scattered with small stones and patches of dry grass that whisper when brushed by the breeze. The tower rises above you, its surface a patchwork of stones that have darkened with age, each block shaped by hands long since turned to dust. There are narrow slits carved into the sides, windows perhaps, but they are not placed in any pattern you would expect. Some are high above, others at odd angles, as though the builders were not following the usual logic of design. When the wind passes through these openings, it creates a strange sound, not quite music, not quite voice, but something between the two. It can be soft, like the gentle sigh of a sleeping earth, or loud and resonant, echoing across the hills like a distant horn. The sound changes with the weather. On calm days, the tower barely speaks at all, its voice reduced to faint whispers that you have to strain to hear. But when storms roll across the land, when the wind howls through the valleys and the sky grows heavy with clouds, the tower roars. The air rushing through its narrow channels creates a chorus of tones, rising and falling like the chanting of invisible monks. People who have heard it during such storms often describe the sound as haunting, even otherworldly. It is not a song of joy, but something deeper, a kind of longing that resonates in the bones of anyone who listens. No one has ever been able to fully explain how the tower produces its voice. Some engineers who have visited the site suggest that the openings in the stonework act like the pipes of an organ, channeling the wind in just the right way to create resonance. Others believe it is more than mere design, that the builders, whoever they were, had a kind of knowledge we have since forgotten, an understanding of sound and air that allowed them to shape something both practical and mystical. Archaeologists have searched for clues, digging around the base of the tower, studying the stones, analyzing the patterns. They have found nothing definitive, only shards of pottery and fragments of tools that give no real answers. To climb the tower is to step back in time. The interior is narrow and spiraling, a staircase of uneven stones that winds upward in tight circles. As you ascend, the air grows cooler, and you can hear the wind moaning through the walls, as though the tower itself is breathing. Your footsteps echo softly, blending with the low hum of air currents. There are small chambers along the way, little alcoves carved into the walls, their purpose unknown. Some think they were used for storage, others for meditation or ritual. The walls are covered in strange carvings, not writing, at least not any language we can read, but symbols that resemble flowing waves and curling gusts of air. It is as if the builders tried to capture the movement of the wind in stone. When you reach the top, the world opens before you. There is no roof, only an open circle of sky, framed by the rough edges of stone. The wind hits you here with full force, carrying the scent of distant rain or the faint metallic tang of dry earth. From this height, you can see for miles the rolling hills, the shadow of distant forests, the glimmer of a river winding like a silver thread across the land. And all around you, the sound of the wind becomes something else entirely. It moves through the tower's openings, creating a symphony of tones that rise and fall with the rhythm of the gusts. Standing here, you cannot help but feel small, as though the tower is speaking not to you, but to the sky itself. The legends of the tower that speaks with the wind are as varied as they are strange. One story tells of a king who built the tower as a monument to his lost love. She had died in a storm, carried away by the winds, and he believed that if he built a tower that could sing with the voice of the air, her spirit would return to him. Another tale speaks of a wandering monk who spent his life listening to the wind, believing that the world itself spoke through its currents. The tower, according to this legend, was his attempt to build an instrument that could translate the language of nature into a song humans could hear. There are even darker stories. Some say the tower is haunted, that the voices you hear when the wind blows are not just the product of air and stone, but the souls of those who died building it. The construction of such a structure would have been no small task. The stones are massive, some weighing several tons, and there is no evidence of advanced machinery in the region's history. Did the builders sacrifice lives to raise these walls? Did they leave their spirits trapped within its stones? On stormy nights, when the tower wails like a living creature, it is easy to imagine that the sound is not just wind but the cries of something ancient and restless. Despite its mysteries, there is a strange peace to be found here. Travelers who visit the tower often speak of feeling a deep sense of calm, as though the sound of the wind has a soothing effect on the mind. Some say it is like listening to a distant ocean, or to the low, steady hum of the earth itself. Perhaps this is why people keep returning, even when the journey is long and difficult. There is something about the tower that calls to those who are willing to listen, something that reminds us of our smallness in the grand scale of nature. If you were to sit at the base of the tower, leaning against its cool, rough surface, and simply close your eyes, you might begin to notice the subtleties of its song. The wind changes every moment. A soft sigh 1 second, a sharp whistle the next, a deep, resonant moan as it sweeps through the higher openings. It is like an instrument played by an unseen hand, a melody that is never the same twice. The longer you listen, the more it feels like a conversation, as if the tower is trying to tell you something it has held in its stones for centuries. Nightfall transforms the tower into something else entirely. When the sun sets and the stars appear, the land around it falls into darkness, but the tower remains alive with sound. The The wind seems to grow stronger at night, sweeping across the open plains, carrying with it the chill of the unknown. Standing there in the starlight, with the wind singing through the stones, it is easy to believe that you are standing in a place outside of time, a place where the line between the natural and the supernatural becomes blurred. There is one particular night each year when the tower's song is said to change, on the longest night of winter, when the wind is at its coldest and the stars burn brightest. The tones produced by the tower shift into a deep harmonic hum that resonates for hours. Some believe this is a kind of alignment, a moment when the tower connects with the sky or with something beyond it. Villagers gather at its base during this night, lighting small fires and listening in silence. They say that if you focus long enough, you might hear more than just sound. You might hear words, a message carried by the wind, though no two people ever agree on what they heard. The tower that speaks with the wind is more than just a relic of the past. It is a reminder of how deeply connected we once were to the forces of nature. In a time before machines, before engines and electricity, people listened to the world around them, the rustling of leaves, the whisper of the breeze, the howl of a storm. Perhaps the tower was built not just as a monument, but as a way of holding on to that connection, of turning the invisible force of the wind into something we could hear, something we could feel in our bones. Even now, standing before it, you cannot help but feel that connection. The wind that brushes against your skin is the same wind that carved valleys and shaped mountains, the same wind that carries seeds across continents and whispers through forests, and here in this lonely place, the tower becomes its voice. The hidden citadel of Machu Picchu. High in the misty folds of the Andes Mountains, where clouds drift like pale rivers and the peaks cut sharp lines into the sky, there lies a place that seems both forgotten and eternal. Machu Picchu, the hidden citadel, is perched on a narrow ridge between two jagged mountain summits, a city of stone clinging to the spine of the earth. At dawn, the world around it glows faintly with a golden light that filters through the clouds, and the terraces glisten with dew. It feels almost unreal, as if this city was carved not by human hands, but by the slow patience of the mountains themselves. To walk among its ruins is to step into a dream, one where time flows differently, where silence holds a kind of sacred weight, and where the stones themselves seem to breathe. Long before it was known to the modern world, Machu Picchu was a sanctuary hidden from view. Nestled nearly 8,000 feet above sea level, it sits on a plateau that overlooks the deep, winding valley of the Urubamba River. The cliffs below are almost vertical, dropping into a tangle of green that swallows sound and shadow. When you stand there, looking down, you feel both awe and a faint trembling in your chest. The Inca builders chose this place carefully, not just for its strategic isolation, but for its beauty and power. The mountains surrounding it were sacred, considered the guardians of the world, and the flowing rivers were the veins of life. No written records survive to tell us why Machu Picchu was built. The Inca left behind no books, no letters, no carved chronicles. What we have are the stones, the terraces that wrap around the mountainside like giant steps, the temples with their perfectly fitted walls, and the pathways that lead nowhere, broken by time. Archaeologists believe it may have been a royal estate, built for the great Emperor Pachacuti in the 15th century. Others think it was a religious sanctuary, a place where priests and astronomers could watch the heavens and perform rituals to honor the sun, the moon, and the sacred spirits of the earth. But when you walk through its empty plazas, when you hear the wind moving between the walls, you start to feel that it might have been something more than just a city. It was a bridge between the human and the divine. The approach to Machu Picchu is a journey in itself. Imagine walking the Inca Trail, the ancient stone pathway that winds through mountain passes and cloud forests. The air grows thinner as you climb, and each step feels like a whisper of the past. Moss-covered stones mark the way, and from time to time you catch glimpses of distant valleys through the mist. The sound of rushing water follows you, from streams and waterfalls that tumble down the cliffs. As you near the site, the trail grows quiet, and then suddenly, the mountains part, and there it is, the lost city revealed like a secret kept too long. When you first see it, Machu Picchu feels alive. The terraces rise in green waves, each one carefully shaped to hold crops, their edges lined with stone. The main structures are clustered together on the ridge, their walls smooth and precise, each stone cut to fit without mortar, as if they were grown rather than placed. The craftsmanship is astonishing. You can run your fingers along the seams and feel no gap, no rough edge. It is said that not even a blade of grass can slip between the stones. This precision has allowed the buildings to survive centuries of earthquakes and storms. The Inca knew how to work with the land, not against it. Their structures were not imposed on the mountains. they were woven into them. At the heart of the city lies the Temple of the Sun, a semicircular structure with windows that align perfectly with the solstices. On the morning of the winter solstice, the first rays of sunlight enter through one of these windows and strike a specific point inside the temple. This was no accident. The Inca were master astronomers, and the movement of the sun was central to their understanding of life and time. Standing there, you can almost imagine the priests watching the horizon, waiting for that moment when light and stone would meet. It must have felt like touching the breath of the gods. Nearby is the Intihuatana stone, often called the hitching post of the sun. It is a carved granite pillar, simple in form but rich in meaning. Archaeologists believe it was used as a kind of astronomical clock, a tool to track the sun's movement and mark the seasons. During the equinoxes, the sun casts no shadow on the stone at noon, a moment of perfect alignment. The name Intihuatana means to tie the sun, as if the stone itself held the power to anchor the sun to the earth. Locals say that if you place your hand just above the stone, you can feel its energy, a faint hum that seems to rise from deep within the mountain. The city is divided into two main areas, the agricultural sector and the urban sector. The agricultural terraces are a marvel of engineering. Built into the steep mountainside, they not only provided space for crops, but also prevented landslides by stabilizing the earth. The soil here was carefully layered with sand, gravel, and fertile earth, carried from the valleys below. These terraces were not just functional, they were beautiful, curving along the contours of the mountain like lines of poetry written in green. The urban sector is where the temples, palaces, and living quarters stand. There are houses with trapezoidal doorways, narrow streets paved with stone, and plazas where ceremonies may have been held. The architecture is both simple and elegant, with every detail serving a purpose. The roofs, now gone, would have been made of thatch, their steep angles designed to shed the heavy rains. Water channels run through the city, bringing fresh water from nearby springs. Even after centuries, the channels still work, carrying a soft trickle that adds to the quiet soundscape of the place. But perhaps the most striking thing about Machu Picchu is its connection to the surrounding landscape. The city was not built in isolation. It was part of a larger sacred geography, aligned with the peaks and rivers that held spiritual significance. The mountain of Huayna Picchu, which rises sharply behind the city, was seen as a sacred guardian. From its summit you can see the entire layout of Machu Picchu, the terraces forming the shape of a condor, a bird revered by the Inca as a messenger between the earth and the heavens. Every stone, every pathway, seems to have been placed with intention, as if the builders were not just constructing a city but creating a living temple. The story of how Machu Picchu was discovered by the modern world is itself a tale of mystery. In 1911, the American explorer Hiram Bingham was led to the site by local farmers. At the time, the city was overgrown with vegetation, hidden beneath layers of moss and vines. Bingham believed he had found the legendary lost city of the Incas. Though we now know that Machu Picchu was never truly lost, the local people had always known of its existence. What he uncovered, however, was a site that would capture the imagination of the world, a place that seemed to stand outside of time. To walk through Machu Picchu today is to feel that same sense of wonder. The air is crisp and thin, carrying the scent of wet stone and wild grass. Clouds drift across the mountains, sometimes enveloping the city entirely, and when they part, the view is breathtaking. You can stand on one of the terraces and watch as shadows move across the peaks, as if the mountains themselves are breathing. There is a profound silence here, broken only by the wind and the distant call of birds. It is easy to imagine the Inca walking these paths, their footsteps echoing in the same way yours do now. There are parts of Machu Picchu that still hold secrets. Some of the buildings appear to have had ceremonial purposes, but their exact functions are unknown. The Temple of the Condor, for example, is shaped to resemble the outstretched wings of the sacred bird. Beneath it is a small cave that may have been used for offerings or burials. There are also hidden rooms and passageways carved into the rock, some of which remain unexplored. Archaeologists continue to study the site, uncovering new details with each passing year, but much of its story remains locked away. What makes Machu Picchu so mesmerizing is not just its age or its engineering, but the feeling it evokes. When you are there, surrounded by the immensity of the mountains, you feel small but not insignificant. You feel connected to the land, to the past, to something greater than yourself. The stones, the terraces, the temples, they are all silent now, but they speak in their own way. They tell of a people who lived in harmony with their world, who understood the cycles of the sun and the stars, who saw the earth not as something to conquer, but as something sacred. As night falls, the city changes. The last rays of sunlight turn the stones golden, and the mountains cast long shadows across the valley. When darkness comes, the sky above Machu Picchu fills with stars, bright and countless, unspoiled by the lights of modern cities. You can imagine the Inca gazing up at this same sky, reading the constellations, finding meaning in the dance of the heavens. The wind grows cooler, and the ruins fall into silence, except for the soft whisper of the river far below. In that stillness, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the mountain itself. Machu Picchu remains one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. We know when it was built, we know who built it, but we do not fully know why. Perhaps it was a retreat for royalty, perhaps a temple, perhaps something we cannot even imagine. But maybe the purpose of such a place is not meant to be understood in a literal sense. Maybe it was built simply to remind us of our place in the world, to remind us that we are part of something vast and eternal, something that cannot be measured by words or theories. Even as tourists from all over the world visit the site, even as cameras click and voices murmur, there are moments when Machu Picchu feels untouched, as if time has stopped. If you find a quiet corner, away from the crowds, and sit on the edge of a terrace, you will feel it. The silence, the wind, the scent of the earth, it seeps into you. The mountains watch, the clouds drift, and for a moment, you are not just a visitor, you are part of the story. You are another soul walking the path that countless feet have walked before. And when you leave, when you take your last look at the hidden citadel, you carry something with you. Not just a memory of its stones and terraces, but a feeling, a quiet knowledge that there are still places in this world that defy explanation. Places that remind us that the past is never truly gone, that the earth holds its stories in ways we are only beginning to understand. Machu Picchu is one of those places, a city of stone, carved from the bones of the mountain, forever speaking in the silent language of the wind and the stars. The fortress that guards the desert's edge. The desert is not a gentle place. It is an ocean of silence and heat, a place where time does not flow but lingers, heavy and unmoving. At its edge, where the shifting sands meet rocky ground, there stands a fortress, an ancient sentinel, half buried by centuries of storms. It is called by many names, though its true one has been forgotten, lost to the whispers of time. To the local tribes, it is known as the guardian that never sleeps, a structure so mysterious that even the most seasoned archaeologists find themselves standing in quiet awe before its weathered walls. Imagine a sprawling citadel made of sandstone blocks, each one carefully carved and fitted together without mortar, their edges so precise that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. The fortress does not seem built. It feels as though it was summoned out of the earth, coaxed from stone by hands that knew secrets long forgotten. Its walls rise in tiers, like the steps of a sleeping giant, with towers that jut upward as if straining toward the horizon. The first thing you notice when you walk up to it is the silence. The desert itself is quiet, but the fortress feels quieter still, as if the air around it is holding its breath. Some explorers describe this sensation as eerie, others as peaceful, but all agree that it feels alive, as though the stones themselves remember the footsteps of the people who once lived there. What civilization could have built something so enduring, so perfectly positioned at the very edge of the desert's breath? Historians believe the fortress could be over 2,000 years old, possibly older, its true builders long vanished. Legends speak of a kingdom that thrived here when the desert was young and green, when rivers ran like silver threads through the valleys and the wind carried the scent of flowers instead of dust. The people who built this citadel were said to be master traders, controlling the flow of goods between distant lands. Gold, spices, and silk may have passed through these gates, guarded by warriors who stood watch from the high towers. The fortress walls are immense, built with stone blocks weighing several tons each. There are no records of cranes or advanced lifting equipment, no evidence of animals powerful enough to haul such weight through the desert. Some researchers argue that the fortress may have been built in stages over many decades or even centuries, the work of generations who devoted their lives to its completion. Others believe that the very precision of the stonework suggests a knowledge of engineering beyond what we assume ancient people had. Could there have been a lost technique, perhaps one that used levers, ropes, and sand in ways we can no longer fully imagine? Step inside its gates, and the story grows stranger still. The fortress contains an inner network of corridors and courtyards, some of which are carved directly into the rock beneath. There are wells that seem to reach down endlessly, their stone linings as smooth as glass, hinting at a source of water deep below. The courtyards are arranged in patterns that almost feel astronomical, their alignments pointing toward distant stars. Was this a military stronghold, a palace, or something else entirely? A place of worship, perhaps, or a meeting point between earth and sky? Local legends say that the fortress was once guarded by a king who could speak to the desert winds. He was said to hear the whispers of storms days before they formed, to know when caravans were approaching long before they appeared on the horizon. Some even claim that the fortress itself was alive, its towers humming softly at night, like the voice of the wind. When the sun sets, the fortress takes on a different kind of beauty. Its sandstone walls glow with a deep, warm orange, catching the last rays of light as if they are being stored for the coming night. Shadows grow long and soft, and the desert begins to cool. It's in these moments that the place feels most alive. Some travelers have said they could almost hear faint footsteps or hushed voices, as though the fortress is remembering the people who once called it home. Archaeologists have tried to uncover its history, but the desert guards its secrets well. Excavations reveal fragments of pottery, tools and worn carvings, but no written language to tell its story. There are symbols etched into the walls, spirals, stars and shapes resembling waves that no one has fully decoded. Could they have been part of some lost language, or do they represent celestial events? One theory suggests that the fortress was part of a chain of desert watchtowers, each one built to guard vital trade routes. This idea makes sense. After all, the desert was once crisscrossed by caravans moving goods between empires. But there is something about this place that feels different, as though it wasn't built merely for defense. Some of the carvings suggest rituals or ceremonies, and there are circular platforms that could have been altars or observatories. Another theory claims that the fortress was abandoned suddenly, as if its people vanished overnight. There are no signs of battle, no evidence of destruction, just a stillness, as though everyone simply walked away one day and never returned. Some researchers believe a great drought could have driven them out, while others whisper about invasions or plagues. But the locals tell a different story. They say that the fortress was swallowed by the desert because its builders angered the gods of the wind. Whether this is myth or history is impossible to say. Imagine standing on one of its high towers, the desert stretching out in every direction like an endless golden sea. In the distance, the dunes shift and dance with the wind, their shapes changing every hour. The air is dry, carrying a faint scent of stone and dust. At night, the sky here is like nowhere else, black and endless, filled with stars that seem close enough to touch. Perhaps the builders of this fortress looked at the same sky and wondered the same things we do now. Where did we come from? How long will our works last? The fortress is not just stone, it is memory. Every crack, every weathered surface tells a story we cannot fully read. Was it built in hope or fear? Was it meant to protect or to inspire? The desert, silent and patient, has kept these answers locked away for centuries. Maybe it will never give them up. And yet, standing there, you can't help but feel a quiet connection to those who came before. You can imagine the sound of footsteps on the stone, the murmur of voices, the clang of tools as the fortress rose from the earth. You can almost see the glow of torches at night, hear the faint songs of travelers gathered in its courtyards, resting after long journeys across the desert. There is a saying among the local tribes: the desert forgets everything except what was built with purpose. The fortress that guards the desert's edge stands as proof of that. It has endured storms, winds, and the slow erosion of time. It is a reminder that even in the harshest places, people have always found ways to create, to endure, and to leave behind something that speaks to those who come centuries later. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, not how the fortress was built, but why. What vision drove its creators to carve stone, to raise walls, to shape a home where life itself seems impossible? Were they seeking safety, or were they reaching for something greater, a connection to the vastness of the world around them? As the sun rises once again, lighting the fortress in shades of gold and amber, the desert remains silent. But if you listen closely, maybe you will hear the whispers of the past carried on the wind. The spiral towers of the ziggurat. There are structures in the ancient world that seem less like buildings and more like messages. Messages carved in stone, sent across the ages to remind us that humanity has always reached for the sky. Among them, none are as captivating or as mysterious as the spiral towers of the ziggurat. These ancient temples rise not in jagged peaks, but in smooth, tiered steps that curve like the slow coil of a serpent, winding ever upward as if to bridge the gap between earth and heaven. They were built thousands of years ago, yet they stand in memory or in ruin, as symbols of ambition, devotion, and engineering skill that still astonishes modern eyes. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the landscape of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, Kuwait, parts of Syria, and Turkey. The land is flat, stretching out to the horizon with barely a hill to break the monotony. The rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates cut through this dusty plain, turning the desert into a place where civilization once bloomed. It was here, in this cradle of humanity, that the first cities rose. And in the heart of those cities, dominating the skyline, were the ziggurats. They were not just temples, they were mountains built by human hands spiraling up toward the gods. The most famous of these was perhaps the Great Ziggurat of Babylon, which some believe inspired the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. But there were others, ziggurats in in Uruk, in Eridu, each one dedicated to a specific deity, each one built with the belief that by climbing its steps you moved closer to the divine. Imagine walking through the streets of an ancient Mesopotamian city and looking up to see this massive structure rising above the mud brick houses and bustling markets. Its walls were often glazed with colorful tiles, shimmering blue or gold beneath the harsh desert sun. At its summit, high above the city, was a temple, a place where only the priests and kings could commune with the gods. The spiral towers of the ziggurat were not simple structures, they were feats of architectural precision, designed in a time when there were no cranes, no steel beams, no modern tools. Instead, builders used baked bricks made from the mud of the rivers, each one shaped by hand and dried in the sun. These bricks were stacked into tiered platforms, each smaller than the one below it, creating a step-like pyramid. But in some ziggurats, the steps weren't straight. They curved and spiraled, wrapping around the structure like a ribbon of stone, creating the sensation of ascending in a slow, deliberate circle, a symbolic journey toward enlightenment. Why spiral? Why not simply stack the levels in straight, rigid steps as so many others did? Some researchers believe the spiral design reflected the movements of the heavens. The Mesopotamians were skilled astronomers, and they saw patterns in the stars, the planets, and the moon. A spiral tower might have been a reflection of the celestial paths above, an earthly echo of the sky's eternal dance. Others think the spiral shape was practical, allowing people and animals carrying offerings to ascend to the top without the exhausting climb of steep, straight staircases. But for the people who built them, the spiral was likely symbolic, a reminder that the path to the gods was never direct but winding, requiring patience and devotion. Standing before one of these towers, you'd be struck first by its scale, even in ruins. Ziggurats are massive. The Great Ziggurat of for example, originally stood about 100 feet tall, with 3 levels rising above a wide base. At its peak, you'd find a small temple, likely adorned with gold or bright painted walls, that caught the sun. Imagine the view from up there, looking out over the city, the fields of barley and date palms, and the slow curve of the river. For the people of the time, it must have felt like standing at the edge of heaven itself. The building process was slow, painstaking, and entirely manual. Teams of workers shaped mud into bricks, dried them in the fierce heat, and stacked them with mathematical precision. Every tier was reinforced with reed mats and layers of tar to protect against rain and erosion. But the spiral path required even more care. Each curve had to be measured perfectly, ensuring that the path wrapped evenly around the structure without breaking its balance. To walk the spiral was to experience the ziggurat not as a static monument, but as a journey, one that revealed new perspectives of the world with every step upward. Yet as magnificent as these towers were, they were never meant to be entered in the way we think of modern buildings. Ziggurats were solid structures, filled with earth and rubble, with only their outer pathways and summit temple accessible. They were more like artificial mountains than conventional temples, and perhaps that's what makes them so extraordinary. These were not buildings for living, but for connecting. Their purpose was to bridge 2 worlds, the human and the divine. There's an old Mesopotamian belief that gods lived not in the sky, but in the high places. That's why mountains, even natural ones, were considered sacred. But in the flat lands of Mesopotamia, there were no mountains, so people built their own. The ziggurat was a man-made mountain, a place where heaven and earth could meet. Priests would climb to the top to offer food, drink, and prayers to the gods, believing that the divine spirits would descend to the temple above. In some stories, the gods themselves were said to walk the spiraling paths at night, moving between the stars and the city below. Over time, as civilizations rose and fell, many ziggurats were abandoned, swallowed by sand, and forgotten by history. The spiral towers, so carefully built, began to crumble, but even in ruin, they speak. Walk among their remains, and you can still feel the echo of thousands of footsteps, the hum of ancient chants carried on the wind. The bricks, though weathered and cracked, still bear the fingerprints of the people who made them, real living people who once looked at this desert landscape and decided to build something eternal. Modern archaeologists have tried to piece together the mysteries of these towers. Excavations at have revealed layers of reconstruction, suggesting the ziggurat was rebuilt multiple times, each generation adding to what came before. Some inscriptions mention kings who claimed to have restored the towers for the favor of the gods, often boasting of the treasures they placed inside the summit temples, gold statues, sacred vessels, even offerings of grain and wine. What's fascinating is how much effort these rulers spent on these monuments, not for the people, but for the divine. The ziggurats weren't places of public worship. Ordinary people prayed in smaller temples on the ground. The spiral towers were reserved for something far more intimate, an attempt to touch the eternal. What's equally intriguing is how these structures influenced cultures that came later. Many historians believe the ziggurat's design inspired the step pyramids of Egypt, and even some of the sacred mounds of Mesoamerica. The idea of climbing higher to be closer to the divine is universal, but the spiral is different. There is something mesmerizing about that curve, the way it draws your eyes upward, urging you to follow to see what lies at the top. Some modern architects have even studied the spiral ziggurat as a model for sustainable design. The way the tiers create natural shade, the way the paths allow for airflow, and the way the structure itself blends with the landscape, it's a reminder that ancient builders understood not just strength but harmony. They built not to dominate nature but to speak with it, to shape it in ways that reflected both beauty and function. When night falls over the ruins of a ziggurat, the world changes, the desert cools, and the stars emerge, bright and sharp in the dark sky. If you were to stand on one of the lower steps and look upward, you might feel a strange sensation, as though the spiral path isn't just leading to the top but to the stars themselves. Some believe the towers were aligned with celestial patterns, their paths mirroring the movements of planets or the cycles of the moon. Could these towers have been observatories as well as temples? It's possible. After all, the people who built them charted the heavens with astonishing accuracy, predicting eclipses and tracking the movements of Venus and Jupiter. The spiral towers of the ziggurat are more than stone, they are stories. Each curve is a reminder of a journey, each step a testament to human resilience. They tell us that long before steel and glass skyscrapers, long before modern technology, humans were already reaching for something higher, not just physically, but spiritually. They were trying to understand their place in a vast, mysterious universe. Today, only fragments of these towers remain, their once bright walls faded to the color of sand, but close your eyes, and you can rebuild them in your mind. You can see the workers hauling bricks in the heat, hear the songs they sang as they worked. You can imagine the priests ascending with offerings of dates and incense, the smoke rising to the sky like a bridge of whispers. You can feel the slow pull of the spiral, urging you higher, step by step, towards something greater. The desert wind moves around these ruins like a sigh, carrying with it the scent of time itself. And perhaps in that moment of stillness, you will understand what the builders knew, that to climb the spiral towers of the ziggurat was not just to reach a temple, but to take part in a conversation that has been going on for thousands of years, between earth and sky, between human and divine. The underground temples of Malta. Beneath the sun-washed islands of Malta, there is another world. It is not a world of bright stone streets, or the sparkling waters of the Mediterranean, but one carved from darkness, a place where shadows linger on walls etched by hands thousands of years old. This is the world of the underground temples, enigmatic structures that twist and turn beneath the surface, whispering of a civilization whose secrets are still buried in time. Among these sites, none is more haunting, more mysterious, than the Hypogeum of Al-Saflieni, a subterranean labyrinth of chambers and passages, carved from solid limestone more than 5,000 years ago. Imagine stepping down into this underworld. The light from above fades with each step, and the air grows cool and still. The walls, shaped by simple stone tools, seem impossibly smooth in some places, almost as if they were polished by invisible hands. It feels less like a place built for humans, and more like one meant for gods, or perhaps for the spirits of those who came before. There is an unsettling calm in the Hypogeum, a sense that the silence is watching you. Malta, a small island nation in the heart of the Mediterranean, has always been a crossroads of history. For thousands of years it has been touched by waves of cultures, Phoenicians, Romans, Arabs, Normans, and more. But long before any of these empires set foot on its shores, there was another people here, a people who built something so extraordinary, so unlike anything else in the ancient world, that archaeologists are still trying to unravel their story. The Hypogeum was discovered by accident in 1902, when workers were digging foundations for a new house. At first, they thought they'd found nothing more than a large cave, but as they ventured deeper, they realized this was no natural formation. They had uncovered a massive underground temple complex, a series of chambers cut entirely by hand, layer by layer, into the soft limestone bedrock. To this day, no one fully understands how these ancient builders achieved such precision using only primitive tools, stone hammers, antler picks, and wooden wedges. The Hypogeum spans 3 levels, each one descending deeper into the earth, each one more intricate than the last. The upper level, closest to the surface, is thought to have been used for ceremonies, perhaps the initial stages of rituals or gatherings. The middle level contains a series of carved rooms, some with mysterious alcoves and niches, where echoes bounce in strange ways. The lowest level is the most enigmatic, a dark, water-carved labyrinth believed to have been used for burials and offerings to the dead. Walking through these chambers, you feel the weight of time pressing down. The stone is alive with marks, swirls and spirals carved into walls, patterns that hint at a culture deeply connected to cycles of nature and the stars. Some of these symbols resemble patterns found in other ancient cultures, suggesting a kind of shared language of the sacred, though separated by oceans and centuries. One of the most astonishing features of the hypogeum is its acoustics. In the so-called oracle room, a single spoken word can resonate through the entire structure, vibrating with an almost supernatural depth. Researchers have discovered that this room is tuned to amplify sound in specific frequencies, particularly those in the male vocal range. Was this an accident, or did the builders deliberately shape the room to enhance the chants and prayers of their ceremonies? Imagine standing in that chamber thousands of years ago, hearing the low hum of a priest's voice echoing through the halls, blending with the rhythm of drums, the flicker of firelight painting shadows on the walls. It would have felt otherworldly, as though the temple itself was alive and answering back. The hypogeum was also a place of the dead. Archaeologists have found the remains of more than 7,000 individuals within its chambers, men, women, and children, who were laid to rest in this subterranean sanctuary. But these weren't just burials. The bones show signs of ritual treatment, carefully arranged, sometimes painted with ochre, a red pigment often associated with rebirth and the afterlife. This suggests the people who built the hypogeum had a complex belief system, one that saw death not as an end, but as a passage, a doorway to another world. What's even more mysterious is what happened to the people who created these temples. The builders of Malta's megalithic structures, including the hypogeum, seem to flourish for centuries, constructing not only underground sanctuaries, but also massive stone temples above ground, like Anar Shah, Chim, and Menajdra. Then, suddenly they vanished. No one knows why. There are no written records, no clear signs of invasion or war. It's as though they simply disappeared, leaving their monuments behind as their only voice. Some theories suggest a massive drought or famine might have wiped out the population. Others wonder if disease or societal collapse played a role. There are even whispers of more unusual theories, of cosmic events or spiritual beliefs that led the builders to abandon their homes. Standing inside the hypogeum, surrounded by its carvings and shadows, you can't help but feel the weight of that disappearance. It's as if the walls are holding on to memories no one alive can remember. The engineering skill required to build the hypogeum is staggering. Consider this: every single passage, every chamber, every smooth curve was carved using nothing more than hand tools and sheer determination. The builders would have had to plan each level carefully, ensuring that the structure didn't collapse. Even more impressive, the hypogeum contains architectural features that mimic above-ground temples, doorways shaped like trilithons, two vertical stones with a horizontal lintel, ceilings carved to resemble beams, and columns that seem to grow from the rock itself. It's as if the people wanted to bring the world of the living into the world of the dead, creating a mirror of life beneath the earth. What is it about underground spaces that stirs the imagination? Maybe it's the sense of stepping out of time, leaving the sunlight and noise behind to enter a place of quiet and reflection. In the hypogeum, this feeling is magnified. Every corner feels intentional, as though each turn was meant to guide you deeper into a spiritual journey. It's not hard to imagine ancient processions moving through the tunnels, carrying torches, chanting softly as they descended to perform rituals in the deepest chambers. Then there are the legends, stories that speak of strange happenings in the hypogeum. Early explorers claimed to hear whispers in the darkness, echoes that didn't seem to come from their own voices. There's even an old story of a group of schoolchildren who supposedly went missing in the hypogeum during the early 20th century, their voices fading as they wandered too far into its depths. Though this story is likely more myth than fact, it adds to the temple's haunting allure. Today, access to the hypogeum is tightly controlled. Only a handful of visitors are allowed each day to protect the delicate microclimate inside. The combination of ancient stone and modern technology creates a surreal experience. Lights reveal the chambers softly, highlighting carvings that have been hidden in darkness for millennia. It feels like stepping into a world that exists outside of time, part tomb, part temple, part mystery. But the hypogeum is not the only underground wonder in Malta. There are other caves and hidden chambers, some still unexplored, hinting that the island's true history might be far older and more complex than we realize. Could these temples have been part of a larger network, a sacred geography that connected the land above to the world below? As you stand in the quiet of the hypogeum, it's easy to imagine that you are hearing the heartbeat of an ancient civilization, a pulse that still lingers, faint but steady in the stone. Perhaps these temples were not just places of worship or burial, but also places of learning, of connection, where people came to seek answers from the earth itself. The underground temples of Malta remind us that there is always more beneath the surface, literally and metaphorically. They are monuments to patience, to belief, to the human desire to touch the infinite. Even though we may never fully understand why they were built, their very existence speaks volumes. When you leave the hypogeum and step back into the sunlight, you feel a subtle shift, as if you've returned from another realm. The streets of modern Malta feel almost too bright, too noisy, after the hush of those underground halls. And yet, you carry a piece of that stillness with you, a reminder that the past is not gone, but simply waiting, quietly, beneath the ground. The dome of forgotten echoes. Far from the bustling cities and modern noise, there lies a dome of stone that feels as if it was built not by hands, but by whispers. It is not just a structure, it is a memory carved into the earth, a place where the past seems to breathe through the cracks in the walls. This is the Dome of Forgotten Echoes, a name given not by the builders, whose identities have long since dissolved into mystery, but by those who stand beneath its sweeping arches and feel the weight of centuries pressing in. The dome is unlike anything you would expect from the distant past. It is neither a castle nor a temple in the traditional sense, yet it feels deeply sacred. Imagine walking up to it for the first time. The path leading to the site is quiet, lined with uneven stones softened by centuries of wind and rain. As you approach, the structure rises slowly from the landscape like an ancient memory surfacing from the depths of the earth. It does not stand tall like a spire or stretch long like a wall. Instead, it curves, smooth, continuous, and deliberate, like the inside of a giant shell left behind by time itself. When you step beneath the archway, the air changes. Every sound, the crunch of your footsteps, the rustle of your clothing, seems amplified and stretched, as though the dome itself is listening, repeating each noise like a gentle voice that lingers long after the original has faded. It is this eerie resonance that gave the dome its name. People say that if you stand at its center and whisper a secret, the walls will hold your words and carry them to someone standing across the hall, as if the dome wants your voice to live on. No one truly knows who built it, or when. Archaeologists have studied the structure for decades, yet every answer they find seems to lead to another question. The design is far too sophisticated for the time period it is believed to have come from. The stonework is seamless in places, almost as if it was molded rather than carved. How could a civilization with primitive tools achieve such perfection? There is also the matter of the dome's purpose. Was it a temple, a place of gathering? Or perhaps something entirely different, a monument to the heavens, a kind of ancient observatory where people came to listen not only to their own voices, but to the movements of the stars. When you look up from the center, the curve of the dome draws your eyes upward, as if urging you to follow the invisible lines that lead from earth to sky. Legends speak of a culture that lived here long before recorded history, a people who understood sound and vibration in ways we have forgotten. Some say they built the dome not just for its beauty, but for its acoustic power. There are places inside where a single hum can fill the entire space, vibrating through the walls and floors like a living force. Was this a place of healing, where sound itself was used to mend the body and soul? Or was it a place where chants and prayers rose up in harmony, echoing so perfectly that they seemed to reach beyond the realm of human hearing? The first explorers to rediscover the dome in modern times described an overwhelming sense of calm when standing within its walls. They wrote about feeling as though the structure itself was breathing, as though it had been alive once and was still holding on to its last fragments of memory. Some reported strange dreams after visiting, dreams of standing beneath a night sky filled with constellations that no longer exist. The mystery deepens when you look closer at the details. Carved into the base of the walls are faint markings, spirals, waves, and patterns that seem to follow a rhythm. They are not written words, at least not in any known language, but they feel deliberate, like a message that can only be understood when seen and heard together. Were these carvings part of a lost system of communication, one that used vibration and echo to carry meaning? The materials used to build the dome are another puzzle. The stones are not from the surrounding landscape. In fact, they appear to have been transported from miles away, some of them weighing several tons. How did these ancient builders move such heavy blocks without the tools and technology we rely on today? Did they use rolling logs, simple sledges, or something more advanced? Or is there a possibility that we are underestimating their ingenuity and the methods they developed, methods we no longer understand because we no longer need them? One of the most intriguing aspects of the Dome of Forgotten Echoes is the way it interacts with the natural world. At certain times of the year, on solstices and equinoxes, the sunlight enters through a narrow opening near the top and illuminates specific points on the floor, as though marking the passage of time. Some researchers believe this was intentional, that the builders used the dome not just as a ceremonial space but also as a calendar, tracking the movement of the seasons and the cycles of the sky. Imagine a group of people standing inside thousands of years ago, waiting for the first beam of sunlight to strike the center of the dome. The air would have been still, filled with anticipation. When the light finally appeared, washing over the stone like liquid gold, they would have known it was time to plant, to harvest, to honor the gods or the spirits of their ancestors. The acoustics of the dome remain its most fascinating feature. Scientists who have studied it describe its sound behavior as extraordinary. A soft whisper can travel from one side to the other without losing clarity. A single tone sung at just the right pitch will resonate so strongly that it feels as though the entire structure is vibrating. Some even speculate that the dome was built around these acoustic properties, that the shape, size, and materials were chosen specifically to create a kind of sonic chamber. What if the dome was not just a place for sound, but a place where sound and spirituality were intertwined? We know that many ancient cultures believed that certain tones or frequencies had healing properties. Could this have been a place where sound was used to connect with the divine, or even to alter states of consciousness? Walking through the dome, you notice how your own footsteps seem different, softer, yet more pronounced. You can stand in one corner and hear someone whispering far away, as though the dome is carrying not just sound, but intent. It's easy to feel a sense of reverence here, a quiet awe that comes from standing in a place where every detail was shaped by hands long gone, yet still alive in the echoes. The dome is not isolated. Nearby there are remnants of other structures, broken columns, low walls, fragments of carvings that suggest this was once part of a larger complex. Could this have been a city, a spiritual center, or perhaps something even more mysterious, like a gathering place for travelers from across distant lands? There is a theory that the dome was part of a network of resonant structures spread across the ancient world. Some researchers point to similarities between the Dome of Forgotten Echoes and certain chambers in Egypt, or the stone circles of Britain, or the underground temples of Malta. Could these places all be connected by a shared understanding of sound and space, a knowledge that has since been lost? As the sun sets and the dome darkens, the echoes seem to grow stronger. It's as though the absence of light awakens something hidden in the walls. You can almost hear the murmurs of ancient voices, the chants of rituals, the songs of people who stood where you stand now, their lives carried away by time but not entirely forgotten. The name Dome of Forgotten Echoes feels fitting. It is not just a description of the structure's acoustics, but a reminder of how much we have yet to learn. Every echo here is a fragment of a story of builders who carved meaning into stone, of generations who walked these paths, of voices that once filled the space with prayer, song, or celebration. Even as modern science measures and maps every inch of the dome, its true purpose remains elusive. Perhaps that is the beauty of it. Not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be experienced, to remind us of how small we are in the face of history and time. Standing there, you realize that the dome is not silent. It is speaking softly, patiently, through its echoes. And if you listen closely, if you truly stop and let the sound wash over you, you might hear not just the voices of the past, but something deeper, a reminder that we too will one day become echoes in the story of the world. The silent stone faces of the Bayon. Deep in the heart of Cambodia's lush forests, where the trees whisper with the weight of centuries and vines wrap themselves around forgotten stones, stands one of the most mesmerizing creations of the ancient Khmer Empire, the Bayon Temple. Here, carved into massive towers of grey stone, are hundreds of serene faces, watching over the jungle with an expression that is both calm and unknowable. They do not speak, yet it feels as though they see everything, past, present, and even the things we cannot name. These are the silent stone faces of the Bayon, and they have been watching for over 800 years. The Bayon is unlike any other temple complex in Angkor. While Angkor Wat is celebrated for its grandeur and sweeping symmetry, the Bayon is intimate, mysterious, and filled with a strange sense of quiet observation. It was built in the late 12th century by King Jayavarman VII, one of the most powerful and visionary rulers of the Khmer Empire. At its peak, this empire was one of the most advanced civilizations in Southeast Asia, building cities, roads, reservoirs, and temples that rivaled anything in the medieval world. But even among all of the king's architectural wonders, the Bayon stands apart. It is not just the layout of the temple, dense, labyrinth-like, with narrow passages and dark chambers, that captures your imagination. It is the faces. Each tower of the Bayon holds giant stone faces, carved with such skill that they appear alive even in their stillness. Some say they represent Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion in Mahayana Buddhism, while others believe they are portraits of King Jayavarman VII himself, who sought to embody the divine power of compassion and protection. There are over 200 of these faces across the temple, each one slightly different from the other, as though they were not mass-produced symbols but unique individuals, each with their own silent story. When you walk through the Bayon, these faces follow you, not in a menacing way, but with a watchful calmness, as if they are quietly acknowledging your presence. The eyes are half closed, the lips curved into the faintest of smiles, the kind of expression that feels both comforting and slightly otherworldly. Imagine arriving at the Bayon just after dawn. The morning mist clings to the trees, and the jungle air is cool and heavy with dew. As the first sunlight begins to filter through the leaves, the stone faces start to glow, their features soft and golden. The temple itself is almost silent except for the distant calls of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. You step into the ancient courtyard and look up, and there they are, dozens of faces gazing down at you from the towers, as if they have been waiting for centuries just to witness this moment. Walking through the Bayon feels like entering another world. The corridors are narrow, with walls carved in intricate bas-reliefs depicting scenes of everyday life, battles and religious ceremonies. You see carvings of fishermen pulling in nets, market scenes bustling with traders, and warriors marching into battle with spears raised high. These carvings bring the ancient Khmer world to life in vivid detail, and yet the silent faces above remind you of something deeper, a spiritual presence that transcends time and history. There's a mystery about these faces. Why so many? Why here, in this single temple, did King Jayavarman choose to surround himself, and by extension all who enter, with these serene expressions? Some historians believe the faces were meant to represent the all-seeing power of the king, who ruled not just as a monarch, but as a divine protector. The Bayon was built at the very center of Angkor Thom, the king's capital city, symbolizing the center of the universe in Khmer cosmology. Perhaps the faces were meant to be the ever-watchful eyes of the empire, keeping balance and harmony in the world. Yet when you stand beneath them, they do not feel like symbols of authority or power. They feel like guardians, silent, compassionate, and endlessly patient. There is something deeply human about their gaze, as though the sculptors who carved them understood the essence of peace, wisdom, and the quiet strength of stillness. Time has not been kind to the Bayon. The jungle has tried to reclaim it, sending roots snaking into cracks and vines wrapping around the towers. Many of the faces have been worn by centuries of wind and rain, their features softened until they are little more than outlines. And yet, they endure. Even the weathered faces seem to hold their expression, as if smiling at the very idea of impermanence. What strikes many visitors is how personal the Bayon feels. Unlike Angkor Wat, which is vast and open, the Bayon draws you inward. You find yourself wandering narrow staircases, stepping through dark passageways, and emerging into courtyards where the stone faces wait in quiet clusters. Sometimes you catch sight of a face unexpectedly, through a small opening or above a crumbling wall, and it feels like a secret moment, a silent exchange between you and the past. Legend says that the faces are not entirely silent. On certain nights when the moonlight falls just right, some claim they can hear faint murmurs or whispers in the wind that passes through the temple towers. Of course, it's likely just the natural sound of the jungle, leaves shifting, animals calling, but standing there at night, surrounded by so many watchful faces, it's easy to believe the temple is alive with memory. There's also a feeling of humility that comes with being at the Bayon. You can't help but think of the countless lives that passed through this place. Workers who carved each stone by hand, monks who prayed in its chambers, travelers who came seeking blessings. You imagine their voices filling the temple, their footsteps echoing where yours now fall, and you realize that while their bodies have long since turned to dust, some part of them remains here, etched into the faces that continue to watch over the world. For many, visiting the Bayon is not just a historical experience, but a spiritual one. There's a stillness here that calms the mind, a sense that the temple was built not just as a monument to kings or gods, but as a reminder of the inner peace that can be found when we slow down and simply exist. You stand there surrounded by those countless faces, and for a moment you feel as though you are part of something larger, a story that stretches far beyond the boundaries of time. When the sun sets, the temple changes. The golden light fades, and shadows pool in the corners. The faces, once warm and glowing, turn grey and solemn. The jungle comes alive with the sounds of insects and night birds, and the bayan seems to retreat into itself, as if the day's performance is over and now it will rest in silence until dawn. Yet even in the darkness, you can feel those faces watching, their quiet presence lingering like a dream you can't quite shake. The bayan is a reminder of the fleeting nature of power, and the enduring nature of art. Empires rise and fall, kings are forgotten, but the faces remain. They watch without judgment, without fear, without time. And when you leave, walking down the path back into the modern world, you carry their gaze with you, a silent reminder of the strength found in stillness and the stories carved into stone. The temple that glows when midnight falls. There is a place hidden deep within the folds of the world, where night feels different, where darkness is not an end but a curtain, thin, waiting to be lifted, to reveal something more. Here, buried beneath layers of history and tangled roots, stands a temple unlike any other. To see it by day is to find nothing extraordinary, just a ruin, weathered and broken by centuries of rain, sun and silence. Its stones are old, worn smooth by time, carved with patterns that have faded almost beyond recognition. You could pass by it without noticing, thinking it just another relic swallowed by the jungle. But when the last trace of sunlight has gone, and the night grows quiet enough for you to hear your own breath, the temple changes. As the hour creeps closer to midnight, the stones begin to glow. It does not start suddenly. The change is slow, subtle, like the first blush of dawn, but in reverse, darkness breaking into light. A pale shimmer spreads across the temple walls, faint at first as though the stones are breathing out a secret they've held all day. Then the glow strengthens, soaking the carvings, filling every crack and crevice with a soft radiance that has no source and no shadow. It is not the cold light of the moon, nor the flicker of fire. It is something stranger, a warmthless brilliance, like starlight turned solid. The locals have a name for this place. They call it the Heart of Night, a name whispered with both reverence and caution. They say that if you watch the glow long enough, you begin to feel it hum through you, as though the stone itself is alive and its heartbeat has merged with your own. It is said that the temple's builders, whoever they were, created it, not as a monument to gods, but as a bridge to something beyond the human world. When you walk through the forest that hides this temple, every step feels like stepping backward in time. The path is narrow, swallowed by vines and roots. The air is warm and still, thick with the scent of wet earth and leaves. Crickets sing their endless song, and every so often, the distant call of an owl echoes like a reminder that you are moving into a place where humans are only guests. As you draw closer, you feel it before you see it, the faint shift in the air, as if the world around you is holding its breath. Then there it is, the faintest flicker, barely visible between the trees. By the time you emerge from the forest into the clearing, the glow is unmistakable. The temple rises like a vision, a pyramid of smooth stone blocks, each one pulsing softly with light, like embers buried beneath ash. For a moment you don't move, you just stand there, letting your eyes adjust, letting the sight sink into you. There's something both calming and unnerving about it, as though you've stumbled upon a dream that was never meant for you. The entrance to the temple is guarded by two statues, tall and worn but still unmistakable. Their faces have been erased by time, yet their posture, their silent presence, feels protective. Some say they were once gods of light and shadow, carved to stand watch over the temple's secret. Others believe they are not gods but sentinels, keepers of something too powerful for mortals to touch. Inside, the glow deepens. The walls are carved with spirals, stars, and lines that twist like rivers. At first, they seem random, but the longer you look, the more they appear to shift, to form patterns that speak to some ancient rhythm, some language older than words. You walk through narrow corridors where every surface glows faintly under your fingertips, where the air feels thicker, as though holding its own weight of memory. At the very heart of the temple lies the altar. It is round, smooth, and polished to a mirror-like sheen. When the glow touches it, it becomes almost liquid, reflecting light in ripples, as though the stone itself is alive. The locals say that if you place your hand on it, you can feel a vibration, a faint, steady hum that rises through your bones, something between a heartbeat and a song. There are stories told about this temple, stories that say it was not built by humans at all, that the stone came from the stars, carried here in fire and thunder, long before the first trees grew on this land. Some say that the glow is not just light but memory, the memory of the stones themselves, of a time when they were not yet still, when they were part of something vast and alive. And yet, there are no records, no ancient texts that explain who built this place or why. The carvings give hints, figures kneeling before columns of light, circles that could be suns or gates, serpents winding through constellations, but they tell no full story. It is as though the builders left a puzzle they knew we would never fully solve. The strangest thing about the glow is that it does not last. As the night drifts past midnight, the light begins to fade, not all at once, but slowly, like the dying breath of a candle. The walls lose their shimmer, the altar becomes dull and cold, and by the time dawn arrives, the temple is nothing but stone again, silent and forgotten, waiting for the next night to awaken. What causes this glow? Some scientists have tried to explain it. They say the stone contains minerals that absorb sunlight and release it slowly at night. But those who have stayed through the night insist it is not that simple. The glow does not follow predictable patterns. It shifts, it pulses, it seems to respond to presence, as though it knows when someone is watching. Others believe the temple is aligned with the stars in a way we do not yet understand. That on certain nights, when the constellations move into place, the temple becomes a beacon, catching some unseen light and holding it for just a few moments. And then there are those who believe it is something more, something beyond science or reason. They say the temple is a living thing, that it remembers the people who built it, and that the glow is its way of calling out across time, reminding us that not all mysteries can be solved with tools and logic. When you stand there in the glow, all of these theories fall away. What you feel is not knowledge, but something closer to awe, a quiet, trembling awareness that you are standing in the presence of something far older and wiser than yourself. The deeper we dig, the more we realize how little we truly know about the past. These ancient structures, silent, enduring and unyielding, stand as puzzles left behind by civilizations whose secrets may never be fully uncovered. Which of these mysteries fascinated you the most? Could there be other forgotten wonders waiting to be found, hidden beneath earth, sand or sea? Thank you for exploring with us on Unearthed Secrets. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more stories from the edges of history, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now.